And 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
Welcome to Rush Roundtable, episode 190, where I have the pleasure of hosting the beginning of Counterparts from 1993, one of my favorite albums, not just of theirs, but in general. So, leading off with the lead single from the album, Animate, as Chris will show. And Chris will make sure we have that hung up there. Nice and placed. So, beginning at the beginning, already, even before talking about the instrumentation, we do have Neil with that count in. In this case, we had Paul with the count in. So, as I'm saying, we have Paul over here counting us in. We have Chris with his license plate, Kira, and we have yet another Paul because, much like in Hot Fuzz, they had the Andys, we have the Pauls.
So I'm Paul.
There's that too.
Yeah.
So, anyway, this album begins with Neil counting it in to sort of give us that vibe that, hey, this is the 90s. We've actually moved a little past that sterile overproduction of the 80s into something that's more organic and real. Does anyone else have anything to say about the opening instrumentation? Because I should probably let someone else speak.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying before we started recording about hearing this for the very first time, the cool thing about being a little older is we got to hear this in sequence and, going progression from album to album to album. And I remember thinking, boy, presto, boy, that sounds really raw. They're back to guitar, and then Roll the Bones a little bit more. But then this went so far that as soon as they all came in, it's just, my mind exploded for a second. I was like, wow, because it was really back to basics in a big, big, big way. This is their grunge album.
The power trio sound is back.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go, you got Neil with his, starts with the drums, and then Geddy kicks in with that riff, that constant bass riff, and it's just like, whoa,
like a machine gun.
Yeah. Do. You're like, how does he do that? Then you find out it's like he's got it's called the flamenco style, I think. So basically, his finger kind of flips back and forth on the same string.
Yeah, he kind of adapted that from watching Les Claypool, because obviously Les Claypool's getting his 16ths with slapping and popping, and Geddy sought to maybe do more of the flamenco kind of a rezagato, if we were to pronounce it in a very English American fashion. So just that back and forth. And I mean, Lifeson's doing the same thing. So they just come in with what was kind of a 90s staple, a very droning and driving sound. So as they said of their 80s selves, that they're very, very much in touch with the music of the day. They remained in touch with the music of the day.
Yeah. And it drives me crazy when people talk about, the riff, it's like even flow or something. Not exactly, but then you could also get into discussion of who influenced who. The Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Nirvana, all those bands, they weren't listening to necessarily, hair bands and shit from the 80s. Their stuff was like the rock of the 70s, Rush being one of those.
They all cited
Rush that was already kind of moving in that heavier rock direction said, oh, we're doing this now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that.
I reference this as having that quality that is basically what Pearl Jam was bringing out. And whenever I've said that, I've never said it in a way where I'm like, oh, they're copying, but it is more of what Chris is saying here, that Rush was influencing this generation. I mean, in the Moving Pictures 40th anniversary release, in the book, you had people like Les Claypool, like Kim Thayil, referencing their influence from Moving Pictures and other albums. So certainly, as you say, who influenced, etc.
And their choice of engineer after they brought Peter back in, and then they went looking for an engineer when they got Kevin Caveman Shirley in. And what kind of sound did he bring to it? The direct sound. He wanted that shortest distance from the instrument directly to the board. So that's
I re-listened to the album premiere.
So did I.
Which I would recommend to anybody who's watching this, like, look that up on YouTube. I used to have it on cassette. I'd listen to it over and over and over again, but listening to it again, and it was funny. I'd forgotten that Geddy said that the Caveman had very little respect for the way a lot of music had been recorded over the years, and he was very, very headstrong on recording it a certain way, and it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although I was
during tracking.
I knew where my cassette is of the album premiere, but for some reason it wasn't on there. So I was a little annoyed. But I did remember Lifeson talking about how the Caveman was basically saying that we're going to put your rack aside. We want you to go direct here. We want you to go direct into the amp there. And the idea that Lifeson even made the comment of not being encumbered by effects, and Getty's sort of, wait, who are you?
Did you say encumbered?
Yeah, it's like, you're not encumbered by effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Getty and Alex fought a lot on this album. They talk about that, I think, in that.
Fought a lot.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it was that same interview when Getty said that that there was a lot of talk during Roll the Bones about how they were reborn and everything. And he says, by the end of that tour, we didn't feel reborn anymore. All we wanted to do was fight. So then, there were certain days that Alex and he would threaten to murder each other in the studio and all that stuff.
That's how you get a good album. Look at the Police.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So I'll keep my comments about this chart, but what a great opening by Neil coming off of the Synthera and Presto, Roll the Bones. I feel like those albums were kind of tame. Maybe that's not the best word, but they weren't really heavy, maybe heavy in some of the topics like the past, and Show Don't Tell has some good heavier riffs. But like coming off of Roll the Bones, I think Animate is such like a pleasant surprise. Like, I listened to other Rush albums before I listened to this one growing up. But if I put myself back in the 90s when my parents were my age, going from Roll the Bones to Counterparts would have been like, whoa, this is a surprise. I like that Rush is getting back to those heavier roots. I love the Synthera. Everyone knows I love the Synthera, but I really also like when Rush had a little bit more metal in their music, even in the beginning, even though their first couple of albums were heavily based on like Led Zeppelin and the Yardbirds and all of the popular music of the time. Animate just comes out the door just swinging. It is a phenomenal song musically. That's my comment.
Yeah. And Getty actually had made the comment when they were looking for a producer and for an engineer and stuff that he had felt that the style of production and some of the songwriting on Roll the Bones weren't in sync. That there were songs that when they played them live, they were like, wow, this really kills live. But on the album, it doesn't so much so. He must have been talking about Roll the Bones, Dream Live, and the songs that they continued to play live. There were some songs on Roll the Bones that were that fit, but in some of them, they needed something heavier, beefier.
And that's something that when you're in a band, that's one of the big conversations is we need to sound like we sound live. We need to get a recording and it needs to sound like our live show, our rehearsals even. So that's because in recording, you always have that mentality of this is going down on tape forever. Even if no one hears it other than your friends and family, this is what you're recording. So you're always a little stiff. So bands are always looking to say, can we sound like we sound when we're theoretically being ourselves? Yeah. So that's probably where they were coming from in that case. Let's move into the lyrics. So they begin with a chorus. Polarize me, sensitize me, criticize me, civilize me, compensate me, animate me, complicate me, elevate me. Direct and to the point. Who has anything to say about the chorus? I'm going to step off for a second.
Okay, yeah. I'll start with the theme. So Counterparts, Neil said in interviews, he wasn't shy about it, the theme of the album being duality. He did say it was one of his more loose themes. He didn't walk into the album saying, I'm writing it about this. It was very abstract. He had ideas for songs. Some had been around a while. Some he just came up with during the writing sessions. And then loosely it started to come together. And he realized he kind of stepped into the theme of duality. So as far as Animate goes, the title itself, it's a play on, it's another word play. In other words, Carl Jung, Swiss psychiatrist, the play on words as far as the anima and the animus, as far as the anima being the unconscious feminine side of man and the animus being the unconscious masculine side of a woman. So animate. So we could polarize, sensitize me, looking for that balance. Colloquially speaking, that Goldilocks principle of balance, finding the balance. So while it sounds like he's talking polarized, it's about one person, in other words, finding the balance of man. And he doesn't write autobiographically. So for the man of the song, polarize me, sensitize me. In other words, find that balance of the masculine and feminine in this example narrative, man of the song.
Yeah,
That's
and he thought that it was almost that it could be about two people, but it's really just about one. And because he's a man, that was his side of it. And he says almost could be like a love song, but it's just an inner quarrel with oneself. You know,
and he does write them to be open to multiple interpretations. So he's not saying that, he's saying that's where I started as I wrote it, but not saying this is what it's about. He doesn't write like that. So open to other people's interpretations. That was the start of where he wrote it.
And even tearing apart the title, as far as, like you say, it's Anima Jung came up with in 1920. Animus, he came up with that in 1923. Hey, 100 years of the masculine side of ladies. And but at the same time too, animate is in there, but also animate could be bringing something to life, obviously, not just not just drawing.
And if you want to go back to that, Aristotle, 350 BC, with the anima of the soul, of the rational soul. So,
which of course Neil always read Aristotle. I also like at the end of the chorus here, he does, he goes through all of these verbs of what to do to him, the man, or the guy writing and speaking. And the last one, to sort of round it off, elevate me. Recognizing the idea of having that duality in sync, having those two hemispheres in sync, would be that elevation of the person.
Yeah.
You got to kind of move my window out of the way so I can actually scroll on our lyrics here for a second. So if we're maybe moving into some of the verse, unless anyone else has more to say. Goddess in my garden, sister in my soul, angel in my armor, actress in my role, daughter of a demon lover, empress of the hidden face, priestess of the pagan mother, ancient queen of inner space. And as the male writer, writing for the male singer, he's really bringing in the feminine side.
Mm-hmm. Or the demon lover, Coleridge.
Do these lyrics, maybe the next set, after he repeats the chorus, maybe remind you guys a little bit of hemispheres? Because hemispheres, there's a lot of like Greek mythology and Greek gods. Greek gods. I don't know. I see these lyrics and I'm thinking about like a little bit of like the Iliad, a little bit of Odysseus, Medusa, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well,
very abstract lyrics and allusions.
Well, as Neil also said, did someone, I'm trying to remember in our preparation, I know it wasn't me, but did one of us put the reference to, certainly Neil in his lack of desire to do standard love songs, feeling that, okay, the 80s were all these love songs. Well, now he's going to do, once again, his way. So to what Kira is saying, as far as he's still going to have that contact with the mythology lyrics of progressive rock.
Yeah, I liked in the very beginning when he was younger, in the lyrics, there's a lot of allusions to classic literature, Greek literature, different kinds of mythology, religion, culture, and it feels like he's kind of dipping back into that a little bit. Again, because Neil's incredibly worldly, incredibly well-read, R.I.P.
Mm-hmm. Daughter of a Demon Lover is actually from Kubla Khan, from Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The line is, as air beneath a waning moon was haunted by a woman waiting for her demon lover. He didn't even realize that he had grabbed that until he was writing Roadshow in 2006. So
that's cool.
It's kind of nice when he grabbed that and didn't realize it until how many years later? So
And
Kinda cool.
considering
And the
Kubla
alliteration
Khan,
here is great, actually. I
alliteration.
never really thought about it. The goddess in my garden, sister in my soul, angel in my armor,
Yep.
daughter of a demon lover.
DDGGG. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That guy knew what he was doing, I tell you. I tell you.
Started doing the writing thing back in Presto. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget that Xanadu was based on Kubla Khan.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh.
So moving on from those caves of ice and gardens, perhaps, yes, he repeats the chorus. Does he repeat it verbatim? It looks like he repeats it verbatim. What does Donna say about that?
When he repeats something, it's important and we should pay attention.
And of course, those lyrics that are repeated are very, as I was saying, very direct, very right to the point. You can't miss those. But heading into the next verse following that chorus, spirit in my psyche, doubt in my role, after in my image, struggle for control, mistress of the dark and conscious, mermaid of the lunar sea, daughter of the great enchantress, sister to the boy inside of me. And of course, we all know that because everyone was into the Little Mermaid circa 1990, he's referencing Little Mermaid. I am joking,
Yeah.
but for all you know,
Yeah.
maybe,
But these
maybe
are
his
all
daughter
just
was really
different.
into Little Mermaid.
Yeah, they're all just different examples of that anima, of the female spirit within the male. Each one of these, each one of those things, you know. And you know, he talked about in that that album release. He said, to quote him, he said, to many people in the 80s, the modern man was supposed to be a woman, to be sensitive and nurturing, and to completely lose the masculine side of the character, the animus. You know, so and it became a bit of an act of men pretending to be more sensitive than they really were, and sometimes women pretending to be more aggressive than they really were. And he was pleading for a balance of that. He says, as counterparts, we are both duplicates and opposites. And then he said something very interesting. He said, in the last 20 or 30 years of sexual revolution, we're trying to change tens of thousands of years of human evolution, with man as the hunter and woman as the nurturer. So those things have to be recognized, and we can change them. There are definitely changes we can make in acting more civilized, but at the same time, it's foolish to deny that which courses through our veins. So the song really tries to reconcile that very complicated and very topical thing. That's what all these lyrics are.
And the two things I wrote in big letters here for this part is, actually, I wrote this one at the top and forgot to bring it up. Counterpart in Oxford, Neil said this in most of the interviews I found for this. Counterpart being defined in the Oxford Dictionary as both duplicate and opposite. So that was really important to him to get through in these songs. And then when I was doing the reading on Carl Jung for this, the concept of I'm going to get this wrong, individuation. Individual beings are formed and differentiated from others. It is the development of the psychological individual distinct from the general collective psychology. So that's the study. First thing I thought of when I read that, 2112. Now, we just finished doing the story of 2112 Roundtable, and one thing that Donna, David, Jim, and I talked about on there was Neil, after going through, I don't want to say his after getting the inspiration from the whole idea of objectivism from Ayn Rand, his belief system, will say, evolved away from objectivism and into the idea of individuation. In other words, he didn't follow the political belief. He was more about the individual than the collective. And it matured and evolved. This was sort of the next step. So that just kind of struck me. So,
yeah.
Well, that's the thing. There's a duality of being one of a group, of a population, of a civilization, but an individual among that group. You can be an individual in a group, vice versa. The group is made up of individuals.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
And we like to characterize, I've said this before, we like to characterize people into boxes and labels, but like the thing is, and this is where I get on my soapbox a little bit, humans are incredibly multifaceted creatures. we're not just like 1D, figures. We're not like this piece of paper, or even like that photograph back there. We're also unique and are very diverse in our interests. And this is going to be controversial, but my whole take on these lyrics as a whole is that this is kind of a commentary on gender roles and norms. And Nobody's Hero kind of echoes this a little bit down the line when we get a few songs down. But, essentially in society, we have these like predefined norms and roles of what men and women are supposed to be like, which is a problem. And even though this has changed in modern society, we still kind of have these labels or boxes that we put people into. So like men are supposed to be strong, not show emotion, be aggressive, and women are supposed to be more nurturing, more emotional. And we have these like really twisted ideas of masculine, feminine, and you can't exceed these norms or else you're an outcast. I mean, if a girl, God forbid, she doesn't like pink or purple, she's a tomboy and she's weird and there's a problem with her. And the same thing is for gender roles and the roles that we have for men and women in society. I mean, traditionally, the story goes like this: boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married, they have children, the woman stays at home, she takes care of the kids, she does the laundry, she cooks, she cleans. What does the man do? He's the breadwinner, he makes all the money, he has a career. And for centuries we have been so stuck in these roles for men and for women. I mean, women in America at least didn't have rights for a long time. Think about how long it took for women to just have the right to vote in general. And if you were a royal woman in England, I've read a lot of books about this too. Basically, you were bred to get married and have kids, and that's all that you were good for. And I'm really glad that we have a younger generation that is sort of just beating down these predefined roles, because humans are so multifaceted, and the landscape that we exist in has changed a lot on a social, cultural, and economic level. So that's my take on this song. I think this is a big comment on gender roles and maybe a bit of a castigation of gender roles. Like men can't show emotion. Why? Men are human beings. You have hearts. Yeah. You have a brain. You have feelings. So yeah, that's my soapbox. I'm sorry.
No, I kind of wrote the same thing, that he talks about the gender roles as being topical then. It's even more topical now with the way he was talking about the last 20-30 years of sexual revolution. Just look at the last 10-15 years. And I think that transgender aside, there are many people who just choose to go by a different pronoun, or they use all pronouns, or they use they or whatever. That is a conscious social change to try and get away from these predetermined roles that people have.
Predefined, yeah.
Yeah. That's, I'm sorry.
I love purple. I have purple hair. I do my nails, but I also love hiking, and I love to do outdoor things, and that might be seen as masculine. You're like a guy, and I'm like, no, I'm just Kira. I love hiking. I love nature.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I love Rush, but we did a whole roundtable on that kind of.
There was.
Well, as the song would say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. As I butcher some French, apologies to all the French Canadians in the audience or in the room. I know.
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah, American. Anyway,
not gonna go there yet.
We move back into a chorus where he repeats those same words in the chorus. So he is driving that chorus home and driving it to a bridge. So the song, for the most part, has been raging on in D minor, kind of a little bit focusing on the 5 chord leading up to that D minor, since as a rock band, they do hit that 5 chord quite a bit. So A minor 7 for a couple of measures, et cetera, and then go through D minor. The bridge modulates to E minor. The chords are following suit, and we get these lyrics my counterpart, my foolish heart, a man must learn to rule his tender part, a warming trend, I almost said warning, warming trend, a gentle friend, a man must build a fortress to defend. Now, at this point, we've labeled this the bridge. If you were looking at a songbook, they might actually label that part the interlude. I say it's a bridge that's separated by the guitar solo, and then he has a bridge after the guitar solo. So I'm going to list the lyrics that follow the guitar solo here. A secret face, a touch of grace, a man must learn to give a little space, a peaceful state, a submissive trait, a man must learn to gently dominate. So in this case, obviously, once again, very intentional. These guys don't do anything accidentally. They're such a thought out band. We all know this. So a bridge, as I say, that, you know, who separates a bridge with a solo? These guys did.
Rush.
Why? Because they wanted to, because they can, because it sounded awesome. So if we were to talk about the lyrics in the bridge, I might quiet down and see what everyone else has to say about the lyrics in the bridge.
Yeah, well, it's just going back to that duality again of my counterpart, my foolish heart. You know, that it in of itself is it's against itself and it is itself. You know, it's those things and learning to rule his tender part. You know, that it's in there, it exists, but I'm a man. I gotta try and control this somehow. You know. But then can you warm your heart and be a gentle friend to somebody, you know, instead of saying, suck it up, buddy. And, you know, can you listen? Can you talk to them and hear what they're saying? But at the same time, a man must build a fortress to defend. It's either defending like their family, or are they building this fortress around themselves to keep out what they don't want other people to know, that there are feelings inside, you know, and that's part of the ridiculous duality of being a man sometimes, you know.
Defend that tender part. In other words, keep it. That is what you're keeping safe. So for all that toughness, you are to keep that part safe. That's the treasure. That's, you know, you're not keeping the tough part. You're not protecting the tough part. You're using that protection to keep that treasure safe. That's that balance, that Goldilocks principle. Both sides. Neither one is something without the other. That's the balance. They're both equally important. Whether it's in each line or each pair of lines, neither one holds more importance than the other one throughout the entire song.
And it's interesting, that last line, a man must learn to gently dominate.
Exactly.
That goes back to what he was saying before about during the 80s, there was this push of men to be more sensitive, but I still have to dominate, but I'll just do it gently. I'll be nice about it, you know?
These lyrics have a big tone of like repression. There's a lot of like I'm just realizing this now. A lot of like juxtaposition and sort of like inner battle of the unconscious. Right. A lot of repression. And this reminds me of a quote, or not a quote, a lyric from Neil. I won't say it. Which song it's from? We carry a sensitive cargo below the waterline, ticking like a time bomb. The primitive design behind the finer feelings, the civilized veneer, the heart of a lonely hunter guards a dangerous frontier. Little bit of a different topic. I know that they don't exactly relate, but it kind of has the same meanings a little bit. Like we have these like instincts that we feel like we have to like close off ourselves and build like a wall. Right. We can't let other people see. So I just had to mention that.
Mm-hmm. That's what happens when the instinct is unleashed. I agree. That's a great parallel.
I would also
when the water overflows and breaks the dam.
Yes. It's a great parallel.
And those guys, as Neil, of course, was saying in the interview when they were recording Moving Pictures, on the turntable was the Police, Talking Heads, Ultravox, the Police. 1985? Yes, 1985, Sting released Fortress Around Your Heart. Might Neil have been taking a little listen and thinking, yes, and not copying, obviously, but just that element of, just grabbing it all. And instrumentally, the guitar solo, very E minor pentatonic, very spacious. And if I were to jump the gun a little bit, because we usually reference favorite live performances towards the end of these, and my go-to is the Auburn Hills concert from Detroit from '94, which was like a month before I saw that tour. Perfect camera angles on Lifeson playing the solo, those long held notes, sort of getting a little bit of the pound on the bar as far as getting the dips there, just working the PRS bridge for all it's worth, because they stay in tune forever. I'm sure if I pulled my guitar out of the case after having not taken it out for too long, it'll be in tune. But be that as it may, I digress.
What I do like about the first part of the bridge is the kind of musical, like pre-solo in the background.
Yes.
As Geddy's singing.
Yeah.
It's really kind of cool. And then all of a sudden it goes into the solo. It fits perfectly.
Yeah, he kind of ramps up to it, and that's something. Obviously, Lifeson, his solo is built on a lot of phrases, which he certainly did quite a bit on Presto. Scars and whatnot, of various songs that it was like he's not really blues phrasing, but post blues rock phrasing. And you think about some of the bands that had songs that had an outro where the singer's singing and there's a solo going on. AC/DC did that a lot for those about to rock. So in this case, like you're saying, it's kind of, we're going to hit that bridge. We have that change in tonality. We have that change in lyrical mood. We have some leads that are bringing themselves up to this open expanse of, it's not a solo, it is a solo, but it's kind of its own interlude. It's not a ripping solo. It's a ambient and moodful, solo.
It fits the song, like any Alex.
Like any Alex Lifeson solo fits the song.
Yes.
And I was not even aware the first time I heard this that was bass in the background, like because it's so distorted and everything. And then we can talk later about the amp that they pulled out of the garbage that he recorded through, right?
The
that he said was about to explode, but it gave it that sound. And one thing interesting, to get back to the choruses about how when Neil repeats something, it's important. The first time and the second time those choruses, Geddy's single tracked. The third time he's double tracked, and by the end he's triple tracked, and that is really cool and very interesting, because I never thought about the Donna Halper rule about the importance of that.
You heard it here first, the Donna Halper rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
July 10th, we have coined the Donna Halper rule, and it should remain in effect.
All right.
As the terminology.
And I do want to throw.
It's going to be one of these episodes in the future. It's like, well, what's the Halper rule? Come on.
It was said. It was named here first. I do want to throw one sentence shout out to, and I don't know if it was the additional keyboards from John Webster or if it was the actual synth that come in. One of my musicians, please say something. Where they come in on the last, is it chorus or verse?
Yeah.
I love the addition there. I know they're few and far between on this album. I absolutely love them on this song where they're placed. They're perfect.
Yeah, fucking beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like the keyboards kind of almost sneak in there to the point where, like Chris was saying, there was this buildup, this, and the repetition, the simplicity. Yep. But yeah, that builds up and we have this outro, then you might not listen to it until sometime. Then how many times did you listen to it? Oh, there's this keyboard line going through here.
I didn't hear it the first however many listens, but when I did hear it, I'm like, that's bloody brilliant. Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cool. And is that organ in the beginning, the first chorus, like in the background? It almost sounds like an organ.
That's why I asked if it was keys or synth. I'm not sure. So
by the end, that sounds like synth, but the first chorus sounds like it could be an organ. I mean, it just could be a synth with an organ sound or something like that.
I can envision that. So yeah, that takes us to the end of the song with a repeated chorus that built up, as we know. So what would be everyone's favorite live version? I mean, I've already spoken up.
I saw it. I witnessed it at R40 Boston. So when they brought it back.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was, I saw it on the Counterparts tour. I have to be honest, I was never, they always slowed it down live. And I always wanted it to be more closer to the tempo of the album.
Just like Tom Sawyer. They slowed it down over the years.
Test for Echo for me was the closest to the album, and maybe in my head. I'm not saying I'm correct that it was the closest. I'm saying it had, to me, to the Test for Echo version, had the punch, and it was the closest speed wise in my head. I'm not saying.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that in a while. I'll have to go back.
I listened to all four before this, just because I make playlists, and to me, it had the punch. It had the. Getty in the interview called it the bestiality. I left that alone. I don't know where. Listen to the premiere. He said it on there, but I'm like, you use that phrase.
I used to have a video of a bootleg of the first of the two nights at Madison Square Garden that they did.
Sweet.
That I was at. Yeah. That was awesome.
But yeah, it's got, for me, Test for Echo had the punch. That's what I like the most about it.
Yeah.
So I just wonder what Kira's favorite version is that's live.
I haven't really listened to a lot of live versions of the song. I'm just going to be completely honest. Really, just R40. Anyone that knows me knows my favorite live album is Rush in Rio, because I grew up with it. I will always be stuck. That's what I mostly listen to. Sometimes a show of hands. Sometimes All the World's a Stage.
Meanwhile, as I put you on the spot.
I'm sorry. I'm also a busy student. I just like have free time. So yeah, I've only heard R40.
I always wind up defaulting to the tour that it was released on, just because to me I feel like the new song from the new album is exciting for them, and not that I want to put myself into their head or make an assumption, but it's the new song. They want to get the new material out, and the fans are usually receptive, so there's a certain energy surrounding that album. So probably for the rest of this, any of these that I would discuss on Counterparts, Auburn Hills, because it's sort of, well, I could say Buffalo, but it's not recorded. I was there, but it was, so it's just one state over on the other side of Southern Ontario. So that kind of brings us to the end, unless we have any other notes of interest on Animate, on Carl Jung, on Camille Paglia. We haven't even referenced Camille Paglia in Neil's interest in her writing that brought this up. But so much has been said, so much can be said. I won't butcher French again, but I will say that obviously 30 years later. 30 years in this autumn, it's the aspect of gender and humanity still remains a hot button, if not more polarizing in a different and sadly negative way, and certainly in the U.S., which we're also pleased that Kira was able to join us for a criminal discussion where she lives, actually.
The one thing that I'll say about the relationships of men and women and how we relate to each other and all that stuff. My daughter came out as gay about 4 years ago when she was about 14 years old. And her partner, who she's been with for almost as long, came out as trans about 2 years ago. And recently I was having a discussion with my wife, and I'm like, do I really relate to him as a man? Or do I, because I knew him before, and I'm like, I don't know. But that's when it occurred to me and what I think all of this, I mean, trans people are trans people, but transgender people, you know what I mean? But again, getting back to people who choose to change their pronoun, is forget about relating to me as a man or as a woman. Relate to me as a human being first. And if we need to get to the man-woman thing, we will. But as far as anything else, it makes no freaking difference. We are just who we are, and however we relate to each other, he's just, another human being who my daughter happens to be in love with, and vice versa, and it doesn't really matter how I relate to him, So I'd be curious to see what Neil's take on all of this would be after, listening to what he said 30 years ago,
Yes. What would he have said of the last 3 years alone?
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the most excellent thing I can do today?
Listen to this song, which I'm going to do right after we're done.
Exactly.
And thank you for everyone who's been joining this episode. Of course, you can certainly you can share, you can hit bells to get notifications. You can certainly add comments. There's another one of our ranks who was unable to make tonight's discussion based on their schedule. And if that individual happened to be watching this and wants to comment, I would really love to know what they have to say about it. So anyone who has a comment, anyone who wants to be involved with the discussion is awaiting and ready to go. And thank you for joining us for episode 190, and we continue Counterparts next week.